And we're back here at the start title screen of this game. We got a few things unlocked here, and that was the New Game Plus mode, which is essentially you just get to play again, but you keep your character growth, you keep your progression in class ranks. You still have to unlock chain attacks and interlinks, and tip notifications are disabled. You keep things like the Art of Flow, Nopon coins, Origin shards, other stuff like that, but no key items. So this is kind of a way, unique monsters also get revived, but this is kind of a way to replay the game, and where you're able to experience the entire story again, if that's something that you want to do. But without having to grind or go look for key items origin shards and collectibles, stuff like that. Since you keep everything, you also keep the majority of your inventory, so that's nice too. But now, what I want to talk about is what I thought about the game in general. So we're going back here to the amphitheater. This is essentially where the final fight takes place. Once you beat the game and you get a stamp on your save file, but the final fight remains there. I can see why they did that, seeing the final final cutscene from last time. But a few things get unlocked in the game itself to reveal a post game that you can access once you've actually beat the save file. Because now, even though the final fight is still there, if we check here in the map, not the map, sorry, in our save file, you can see that we have a stamp now on the top left of our save file. So that definitely that gives us essentially some more content that we can unlock in this game. Now, in terms of what I thought about the game as a whole, the first thing I want to say is that the story itself was very involved, and I really enjoyed that. That's something that I really liked. It's interesting because usually in most games, the story is kind of in most games that I've played, the story has been pretty good, but sometimes I start to skip through it a little bit or just try to quick read through my way through it because I get kind of bored of it, especially after in very long games where kind of like this one, where I've spent many hours on it. But in this case, I just found myself really enjoying it the entire time, and I was really happy with how much the story was impacted by our actions and how much just we were integral to it the entire way through. And just seeing the development in it was something that I really enjoyed. Experiencing the entire way through. On the topic of that story, there's also the side story with colonies that shows colony growth, and also the colonies develop a deeper and deeper relationships with each other. So I didn't show these side stories in the videos because I didn't really end up doing all of those in my own time. But with that being said, I would definitely recommend doing all the side stories as you progress the story because they grow alongside with you. That's what it feels like when you go and do all of their side stories as you progress through the game. They all develop. You have character growth both in the commanders for each colony and in all of their members because you get many side quests that involve a bunch of their different members. So it's something that you should definitely go out of your way to do, and you should do it as these new side quests open up when you progress through the chapters, because then you get an even deeper connection with the game itself, because you get to experience all of these people coming into this new world and trying to figure out how they're going to live in this new world with the fact that they don't have a flame clock anymore, and the fact that they have to they don't have to follow Mobius's orders anymore, and then learning that their consoles were essentially just, you know, taking advantage of them the entire time, right? So I would definitely recommend doing the side story. I really love the side story. It felt integral to the main story as well. It's not like this side story was just something that was going on in its own world, but it felt like it was truly a part of everything that was happening. And it just made the end cutscenes where all of these commanders show up to help you just feel that much better, because it was, you really start to like all of these commanders that much more as you help them out and as you learn what their struggles were, what kind of events they had to suffer through, and the things that they've had to put up with in order to make sure that their colonies can make it through. Now, with all of that being said, I kind of I was kind of really excited to see how everything developed with these colonies towards the end, and even in the post game, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a few more of these side quests that open up, so you can continue with that progression, continue with that development, and continue to experience that colony growth. Especially and each colony is it's a completely different story, but there are some of them that especially stuck with me. For example, there was Colony Mew, which is Fiona's colony. Now, this colony is composed of a lot of very, very early termers. So these are people that are in their within their first 5 terms, I want to say. So they're all very young, at least relative to members of other colonies. And they really had to figure out how they were going to continue to live, because they more than anyone in any other colonies didn't know how to survive on their own and didn't know what they were going to do. Then you have characters like Valdi, who was just incredibly charismatic and always tried to go out of his way to help others, and always wanted to just do something to improve colony relations between all the colonies, because that was his character. His entire thing was just wanting always to improve everyone's lives and always do more with improving these friendships between all these characters. And then you also have Alexandria. Alexandria was an interesting one. She was less charismatic than Valdi. However, due to the nature of her projects, a lot of the things she did always resulted in kind of the assistance of other colonies. But not just that, also kind of like resulted in her improving relations with other colonies and aiding them. But this kind of came as a result of her in the previously when she was under Mobius control, she developed technology that would allow her to spy on other colonies, but then she ended up being able to use it to help them. And then there's also people like Juniper from Colony Tau. Colony Tau is also one that I really enjoyed seeing, because the way they had it always lived was they never really had a console like properly walk them through how things were done in pre-liberation times, essentially. So they always had to survive by just hunting in the forest and finding their own food and seeing what they could do in order to increase their flame clocks. But because they were never sent into battle by their console the way the other colonies were, and they were ready to let themselves die, essentially. So it was just really cool to see how they slowly developed, and they slowly started to learn, like, oh, well, maybe we don't have to just sit back and die, essentially. Maybe we could do way more than this. And seeing them develop, actually go out and want to learn more and want to explore other colonies was really satisfying to see, because learning how to actually become a part of kind of the society that the other colonies were a part of was really huge for them. And a part of that involved a lot of their members going out and looking for and creating friendships with the other colonies, because so that they could learn just how to survive in this world. And that it's like that for all the colonies. It's like that for all of their side quests. And then that was just the commanders. There's also all these side quests involving all of their members, and just many really nice aspects of this whole thing, of all of the side stories that I really enjoyed. And that's just the colonies. There's also to mention the character growth in the members themselves, in all of our how to explain it, for our main party here, Noah, Mio, Senna, Lance, Uni, and Taeyeon. It's just, when you go through the side story with all of their, and watch them as the main story progresses, seeing their character growth just feels amazing as well. You get to slowly experience their characters change and slowly grow as the story progresses, and their relationships with each other changes a small bit over time. And it's always just, and it's so satisfying to see, because you even have small things, kind of like where at the very beginning, when the characters were still kind of rough with each other, Senna calls Uni love, and Uni didn't really appreciate that, but then she starts calling everyone love. It's just kind of cute to see. And then over time they slowly start getting closer with each other, and kind of picking up little mannerisms about each other. And that's mostly just because whenever they interlink, they shared each other's memories, and they share each other's feelings. So it's just and that shows in that character development, and I'm really happy with how they showed all that, because it's just really satisfying to watch all that growth happen. And each of the main characters in our party had their own ascension quests and everything like that. Some of those ascension quests were a part of our main story, but some of them were kind of optional, and you could do as part of side quests when you went back to colonies to do all the different side quests. Well, all of those ascension quests just were great in terms of showing the growth of these characters as well. I really enjoyed them in that aspect, and I'm really glad that they did it the way they did it. The cutscenes themselves, kind of on that topic, were really good at getting across the feeling that each one of them wanted to portray. Namely, kind of, for example, at the end, with the final battle approach with Zed, and then as we actually got there, they were really good at displaying kind of those feelings of grandness, of just huge things happening, right? But not just that, you have other cutscenes, as the story progressed, where they could depict feelings of humor or kind of a feeling of warmth, because it was little cutscenes that showed the relationship between the characters getting better and developing. So those cutscenes were really got the point across that our characters were, growing within the group and getting closer to each other. And that was a whole other thing in and of itself that was really nice to see and really nice to experience. There's also times when the cutscenes depicted a sadness or frustration or anger, depending on the scene when they met Urine and first found out that Urine was still alive. It really showed how all the characters were, in our party at least, were really suffering to see Urine back and as a member of Mobius. And it's just the way the cutscenes were able to portray that was really good. Half the time while playing this game, I felt like I was also watching a movie, but then also participating in the movie. And it's really nice when a game feels like that. One thing that I kind of was like a little bit sad about, I guess you would say, is that you can't really go back and rewatch these cutscenes. I mean, you can in the event theater, but there's also parts of the cutscenes that are not in the event theater because it's not, how do I put it? Because they're not exactly a cutscene. It's those scenes where they walk up to each other and there's a dialogue bubble, but it is voice acted. Those portions I think are not in the event theater. That being said, that I think that's the whole point of New Game Plus, where it's like you can go back, restart the entire game, you keep all your character growth, all your levels and everything, but you can experience the entire game all over if you so wanted to, but you wouldn't have to deal with grinding or going out of your way to do. Probably, I would assume maybe you keep the side quests as well, so you wouldn't have to worry about grinding, you wouldn't have to worry about doing all the other stuff as well, so you could just go straight through the story and get to experience all of that growth all over again while you have you get to experience everything again while just having your characters essentially steamroll all the fights, I guess is kind of the best way that I could put it. So it's not all bad that you don't get to rewatch all cutscenes, as much as or it's not that bad considering that you do have the option to go back and do everything with New Game Plus. So that's pretty nice. I really enjoyed the abilities and skills that were introduced in the game. I think those were all super cool. I loved all of the classes and all of their arts. Well, there's some arts that were better than other. I actually take that back. That is one small, I wouldn't necessarily call it a complaint, but it's one thing that I do wish could have changed a little bit. And I know there's items to improve this, what I'm about to mention. But it's still kind of difficult to get it off properly. And that is certain gimmicks that certain classes revolve around. For example, we have right here Sagiri. Sagiri's whole gimmick revolves around her putting debuffs on our enemies here. Now the problem is, I'd say about 80 to 90% of the time, they resist those debuffs, as just happened right here. Now, I know that there's accessories that let you decrease the resistance of enemies, and I think there might also be attacks that let you decrease debuff resistance and stuff like that. But even with those, because I've tried some of those out, and even with those in place, I still end up usually getting resisted. And so it makes it kind of difficult to use that class and properly use it the way it was meant to be used, because you can never get those debuffs off. And if you do, you get like one debuff off after 10 arts, right? And it just makes it makes that class kind of useless when there's other classes that can perform, their own gimmicks way better and can get so much more, damage off on an enemy or on a monster, or get so much more, use in them by the time Sagiri even gets a debuff on, right? So I do wish there was probably a way to mitigate that, or a way to make it so that we could get debuffs off better. I do understand that could change the difficulty, impact the difficulty of the game quite a bit. considering that it would start to make it such that we could debuff a bunch of debuffs off on bosses. But you don't even have to make it so that each of our attacks that have a debuff with them, you don't even have to make it such that they actually apply the debuff. You could also just make it so that there's a higher chance of that debuff proccing. Even if the debuffs procced like 50% more, I think that would make it better. You could even go so far as to say that they proc like twice as often as they currently do, and I still don't think they'd be that overpowered. Especially since some of the debuffs they do help, but they're not like game changing that much, So that is one thing that I would have like a minor complaints about, but other than that, I've really enjoyed all the classes. I think so far some of my favorite classes are probably like Incursor, where your damage increases with each critical hit that you land, and also Triton's class, the Soul Hacker, just because of that class has so much flexibility to it, with the fact that you get an ability from either an art or a skill from any unique monster that you fight, and every unique monster that you fight. So you just get, with the amount of skills and abilities that you get, or the skills and arts that you get, it makes that class so flexible, and you could do so much with it. You can get so much damage off with smash attacks on that class too, specifically because of the skills that it gets access to and some of the arts that it does. I'm very excited about this game's post-game as well, with everything that happened, and hoping to see what else opens up in this game. I'm going to be playing that. I probably won't be making videos on the post-game itself. Instead, I'm just going to be playing them on my own so I can fully experience them. What I will probably be making a video on is some of the side story cutscenes. So I'm probably going to make a video where I show like all the hero story cutscenes, and maybe I'll do like kind of show all the cutscenes for each of the chapters or something like that. Maybe I'll do a few tutorial videos where I show certain things that might be a little obscure about the post game, or things I might find interesting. But in general, I'm going to be doing most of that on my own. In terms of the actual story, the mainline story, I think that the final fight with Zed tied everything up really well together. I really think that, the build up to that final fight was amazing. The way it ended was super good, in my opinion. You have just like everyone coming together to kind of accomplish this final big push that we have been building up for throughout the entire game, right? And it was incredible to watch. I really love how that fight just brought it really felt like it did what Ouroboros has been trying to display this entire time, which is what it brought it represented everyone's hope and everyone's will together in one fight against Zed, who has been keeping everyone trapped in time for all this time, And I think that final fight really did a great job at representing what it was meant to, right? And I just love how it was so involved, and the scenes were perfect, but also the fact how during the fight there was like 4 or 5 phases, I think, from what I can recall. But what I really liked is that during that entire fight, it really there'd be a mid cutscene or something that happened at some point in it, that would just where some of the commanders would join you, or at the end when the queens joined you, And then when Zed split you up and you were fighting with Noah's side versus fighting with Mio's side, and you had different commanders join each side, all of that I think was done perfectly. I absolutely had a great time with that entire, that entire scene, that entire section, the whole cutscene, the whole fight. It was all great. I even think that it handled the over leveling pretty well, because one thing that was happening quite a bit is that if you do go back and do all the cutscenes and everything, you do end up pretty over leveled for the fights, which in of itself it wasn't too harsh, because if you play on hard mode, some of the fights were still challenging, even with some of the fights were still challenging, even with the whole fact that we were sometimes 15 or even 20 levels above the rest of the enemies that we were fighting at the time, right? But here with Zed, once you face him off, he was level 75, I think, from what I can remember, and now we're level 83, but I think we were level 82 at the time. So I think it was pretty well done. He wasn't that much below us in terms of level, and even then he was challenging, and with all the gimmicks that he threw at us, with splitting our party up, and at the start doing the whole thing where he froze us and then put fire on the terrain, and then also just like completely blocked all attacks with that shield, and the way everyone had to break out of their shackles to become Ouroboros so that they could fight him. All of that I think was great, and I like how dynamic the fight was. I like how many times it changed, and I like how many cutscenes there were kind of intertwined within the fight to fully express the progression of said fight. I'm really happy with how that whole piece turned out. I'm also super excited, like at the very end especially. I know I keep mentioning this, but the commanders joining you and the queens joining you, it felt overwhelming, because I mentioned during the fight that I kind of expected something like that to happen, where the commanders would help you in some way. Never did I expect all the commanders and the queens to just show up in the fight itself and actually aid you and use all of their arts very dynamically. Like even when they did join, they could have very easily kind of made them fight the way that NPCs usually fight when they join your fights, which is essentially they don't do a lot of damage and they don't do a lot to support you. They're just kind of there for like added effect. But in this case, when the commanders joined, they made full use of their arts and their abilities and their skills, and they fully were able to, they healed us up. They kept us alive. They used their talent arts whenever we used our talent arts. It was really great the way they did all of that, and I felt excited to have them there. The queen, and then that was just the commanders. The queens, when they joined, I was through the roof. It was amazing to see them. I also was not expecting at all for the queens to ever join that fight. That was something completely caught me off guard, and I thought it was incredibly exciting to see. And I was very happy when I did finally see them join the fight. So with actually seeing them there, I'm very excited to have them in our party in the post game. So I found out that you do in fact get the queens in your party as part of the post game, and I can show kind of where you can find them. But essentially, the way it's going to work is that you can go back to the spots where you found the queens to begin with, and you get the cutscene. It triggers a cutscene where you can have them join you on. You can have them join you in your party. So you have Nia's here. Yeah. See, there's already the question mark. If you go back to the castle where you found Nia, you're gonna get the side story that's gonna trigger in order for you to get Nia as part of your team. And I want to say that for the Keves Queen, I don't think it's in here. Yeah, I don't think it is, since mostly considering that, you know, she left there. But I think hers should be in the Keves Castle. It's not here. I might have to check out exactly where that is and show where. Oh no, here it is. It's in the first level of the Keves Castle, and you'll find her in there. Yeah, because this is where we had our original battle against the Fate Queen, I believe. So if you go into the first floor, you're gonna find Queen Melia of Keves, and you will get her quest, and then she can join your party as a hero. So that's gonna be really excited. I'm super excited to have them join and see how we get them in our post game and all of that stuff. Kind of on the topic of the stories, I mentioned that usually I kind of get tired of stories and stuff. I want to say the story in this game, in Xenoblade 3, is definitely the most interested I've been in a game storyline of probably any game that I've played up until this point. I really am. I'm super happy with all those cutscenes. I never wanted to skip any of the cutscenes, and I'm so glad that I didn't, because they were all so well done. I know that, like, at the start, when I first started playing this game, kind of the first few, I want to say the first few level, or the first few chapters, I complained a bit about how there was a ton of cutscenes, and they took up a lot of time, and all that stuff. But I personally, as it went along, and as I continued progressing through that story and watching more of those cutscenes, and the story became more and more involved, and I started to like the characters more, I never felt that way anymore. The cutscenes were, I was always very excited to see the cutscenes. I was always very excited to see what came next, and I just always really wanted to see the next point in the story, you know? This is definitely, it's definitely the most interested I've been in a story for a game in forever, you know. And that final cutscene at the very end, after the fight with Zed, where the worlds were splitting and all the characters were trying to come back together. I'm not lying when I say, like, I wanted to cry. It felt very emotional, just because you've been with these characters through the entire story, and you experienced everything with them. You see everything that they experienced together and how much their connections grew. That final scene just hits that much harder with everything splitting. And even more so after. I didn't show this at the end of last video because I forgot that it was coming. But when you save at the end of after that cutscene ends and after the credits, you get Mio's journal entry, and her journal entry involves, basically, she's just talking about slowly forgetting the memory of Noah and not really seeing Noah anymore. She said that, like, you know, Noah's silhouette slowly fades into the haze, and her memories start to fade in the incoming sunlight. That just drove it home, because it's like they were desperately trying to meet each other again, and then after all of that, in the journal entry, you see how they're also going to forget about each other. And it's just, it feels like something breaks in you when you see that. It was it was hard to watch, but I think it was an incredible way for the story to end. And uh, this game has just, I would say, brought out emotions way more successfully, I think, than any of the other games I've played up until now. And I've heard that this is the last game in kind of this series of Xenoblade, in terms of Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3. But I think there's going to be more Xenoblade games. They just won't be a part of this main trio anymore. They're going to be more like spin-offs or their own thing. But if it's made by the same team of people, I'm very excited to see what else they can come up with. Because this was incredible. And I'm in love with this game. At the very end too, in that final cutscene as well, after the fight with Zed, right after the world split, you see a portrait in Queen Nia's room with the members of Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and you get there's a robot blade. I forgot what her name is. She's also from Xenoblade 2, and in Xenoblade 2, in case you haven't experienced that game, the characters in that game also have blades, but their blades aren't necessarily their weapon. The blades are like a robot or a type of companion that joins them in their battles, and they call those companions their blades. And that robot that joined Queen Nia in her castle, that was her blade. And that was so cool to me. One thing that I believe, a theory that I currently have with Keve's Queen and Queen Melia and Queen Nia, is that Queen Melia is actually from the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and Queen Nia is from the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And I think probably Queen Melia, that's probably why all of these Levnesses from Keves, they look like the Mechon in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. So, and this theory is probably, my guess, the internet's large. I haven't looked up any theories as to how that ending happens. There's probably also already like very fleshed out theories on the internet about what that ending meant and everything. I haven't read any of those, so I don't know what the leading one is right now. My personal one is that Keves comes from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and Nia and Agnes comes from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And that's why Nia had the members from Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and the blade from Xenoblade 2. Whereas Keves, a bunch of their tech looks like Mechons. And then also why Noah, who is a Kevesian, can wield his blade, which looks a lot like the Monado. And also Queen Melia, there's a Melia Antiqua, I'm pretty sure from what I recall, there is a member, or there is a character in Xenoblade 1 called Melia, and I think it's the same name, Melia Antiqua, and she is a queen in Xenoblade 1, and she also has wings. She is or I don't know if she's a queen or a princess, but she is Hyentia, which are the characters, the people who have wings on their head. So that's my personal theory. It makes sense too in my head because their worlds, Melia and Nia's worlds, kind of colliding and almost annihilating themselves with each other, kind of leads into the whole idea where in Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2, you learn about this scientist who had this giant experiment where they were in this one world that unleashed this incredibly huge experiment that split that world into two universes, into the universe of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2. And at the end of those games, you have these final battles, which essentially these final battles where you kind of cross in between those two worlds. You know, the world of Xenoblade 1 meets the world of Xenoblade 2 at the very end of each of those respective games, which I think then leads perfectly into this game, into Xenoblade 3, where now those worlds are colliding and about to annihilate each other, and you have to, you know, get them to split back up. So I'm very excited to see, you know, what the developers do with that whole storyline in the DLCs, if they do. There may very well not be much of a storyline, but I do know that at the end of Xenoblade 2, there was some DLCs where the characters of Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 1 could meet each other on the field. So, you know, they might be doing something similar to that here in this game. And personally, I'm very excited to see what happens there. One thing I will say that I kind of, and I understand this, why we can't have this, but I kind of already mentioned it, but one thing I wish we would have gotten for this game is kind of a post game that was post fight with Zed. As in, we beat Zed, and then we get to continue playing the game after that point, rather than before fighting with Zed. But I understand why that's not possible, and I understand why they didn't do that, and I understand why they made it where you have a New Game Plus instead, and this game stays in a pre-fight with Zed state, but you have a stamp that unlocks post-game content. Because obviously, after the fight with Zed, it's almost instantly, you know, the world starts splitting and everything changes. So it's completely understandable why they didn't give us a post Zed fight post game. I do wish we could have seen what happened with that, what happens with everyone after that, but I don't have any complaints with how they went about it, just with considering the path that this game was on with its fight with Zed. And honestly, I think in kind of a final way, this game, I absolutely loved it. I'm very happy. I'm very excited to finish up the post game. There's a few things that, you know, you can still take care of in the post game. Namely, there's certain things called super bosses that I'm going to fight. There's the both queens, who, as I mentioned, I'm going to be showing some of those side stories, that the cutscenes for them in a video where I just kind of do collages of those side story cutscenes, and that's all gonna be great. I'm gonna go and try to max out some classes, beat those super bosses, finish up side quests, and then I'll see. I might be back for the DLCs. There's no guarantee for that. It's gonna depend. If the DLCs add to kind of main story type of quest lines, then I might come back to show them. If not, I might not. But honestly, even if they show just hero quests, then I might come back to show them as well. Because the hero quests, they're great. I love them. And yeah, those were my thoughts on the game. I really enjoyed it. I'm really happy with it, and I really hope you guys did too. I'll see you guys in either the DLC or the next game. Thanks for watching.